All right, thank you for joining us today. I want to talk for a little bit about GenAI. It is the topic that everybody seems to be talking about and trying to figure out. And from a security perspective, I feel like we're trying to decide how to use it, where it should be used, and what are the security implications of using it. So I'd like to talk for just the next few minutes on some different ways that cybersecurity leaders can leverage AI in the upcoming year. From a bit of background, my name is Tim Chase. I run our field CTO team here at Lacework. My background is actually both as a security leader and a CISO and as a practitioner. So I spent many years doing application security testing and cloud security testing, along with running and building security teams. So I get both sides of the problems that we're seeing in the cybersecurity workforce today. And so let's just talk through Gen AI, some of the problems that we're having in the security industry today, and ultimately maybe how we can leverage this technology to help us. So it's interesting. One of the problems that we're trying to solve for, no matter what we're doing in cybersecurity, ultimately we're trying to secure the data. Everything that we do is making sure that the business stays secure and that our data stays secure. That's typically the ultimate goal of anything that we do. And in 2023, the global average cost of a data breach reached $4.45 million. That's a lot of money when you take everything into effect. There's obviously the issue of the if you have to pay any sort of ransom to the criminals. There's any sort of privacy and data fines that you have to pay. The loss of goodwill. Did you lose any of your customers? Right. There's a lot of different data points that adds up. But the $4.45 million average cost is just exponential. So that's one of the major problems that we're seeing in the cybersecurity field today. And that's not getting any better. That's increased every year that I've been tracking this. And it's only going to continue to get more and more onerous, and the amount is going to get larger as more data gets put out there and as more incidents start to pile up and happen, right? And so that is one of the key problems that we have to deal with in security is how do we do everything that we can in our power not to have a data breach? And another issue that we're having to deal with in the security industry is kind of the skill shortage in cybersecurity. I've been leading teams for a while, and I can tell you that when I first got into cybersecurity, it wasn't too difficult to find staff, to be honest, right? If maybe you couldn't find somebody who had done application security before, but you could find someone who was 80% there and get them, 20% of the way. Finding network security people really wasn't as big of a deal. But over time, as technology like cloud have really kind of taken off, and it feels like every company is either in the cloud, going through a cloud migration, or going to go to the cloud. As we start to put more and more data out there and security takes even more of a prevalence in society, the gap only continues to grow. And I don't see this lessening in the next year or two either. You can see there's always more data breaches in the news. There's more onus on the boards to take an interest in cybersecurity. So if they take an interest in cybersecurity, and then they take the statistic that we just talked about related to the average cost of a data breach, you take both of those things together, and that should create opportunities within the cyber teams to grow. And so I think that the cybersecurity professional shortage is probably going to continue to grow. So you can see that 39% of security professionals claim that the skills shortage has led to an inability to learn or use security technologies to their full potential. I look at that and I see, they're too, to me, it means they're too in the weeds doing things that aren't a value add. They're looking through data, trying to find correlation points to look for threats. They're looking through the posture of their environment, trying to understand what their security posture is. They're doing things that don't necessarily add up to them being at the full potential of their job, right? And so it's taken away from them providing more value to the business, and it's taken away from them being able to learn and learn about new technologies, learn about new features, and really kind of take their cybersecurity career to the next path. And so with both of those two problems, I think there are some ways that we can look to leverage Gen AI going into next year. And just as some data points that we have already, there are some organizations that are using AI and automation together to solve some of these problems. And so when you look at where we are already, companies that experience a data breach, their resolution lifecycle was about 108 days shorter than one who did not. And that is significant for a number of reasons. It's significant because the quicker that you can close a data breach, the less likely that it's going to spread, right? The sooner that you can figure out what's going on with a data breach, the hopefully the less data that will actually be stolen, right? And so the quicker that you can find out about, stop, and fix any sort of a data breach, that's just money, right? That is time. And so those are kind of quantitative measures that you can use from a business perspective that the board can understand. And then on average, they saw nearly $1.8 million in lower data breach costs, right? If you fix something sooner and you fix it quicker, just like with anything else in the development lifecycle, it's going to save you time and it's going to save you money. And so when you look at both of those statistics, it's really worth diving into how we can use Gen AI going forward to inside of our cybersecurity program. And the first one that I would suggest is to augment your team, right? So we talked about the cybersecurity shortage to some extent. So we need to find ways to fix that. When I talk with security professionals and analysts or CISOs who run a SOC team, they spend a lot of their time maybe doing things that aren't value add, right? There are people who comb through alerts that come into the SIM and they're false positives. Well, that's when they're having to sort through tens or hundreds of alerts per day. That's not value add. That's not value add for an internal SOC team. It's not value add for an external SOC team that you're ultimately having to pay for. So we need to find ways to use Gen AI to augment our team. And I think that's really the strongest use case. And we're starting to see that go this way. A lot of the major MDR providers that are out there are using Gen AI, or at least they will start to next year to do some of this. They'll be able to capture data from alerts that are coming in and figure out ways to decrease those alerts or take some of those mundane tasks away. And it really, you can look at it from both sides. You can look at it from people internal in some of the tasks that you do, maybe automating some of the GRC tasks or automating some of your SOC alerts, like anything along those lines are ways that you can augment your team. And that it's not just a cool thing to do, but it actually will help the job satisfaction of the employees that you have, because I feel like a lot of security professionals are reaching this burnout stage, right? So they'll job hop, or maybe they turn to doing virtual CISOs or something like that, because they're tired of doing this mundane stuff. They're tired of looking through the alerts. So by automating away some of this stuff, you will help increase the job satisfaction of the employees that you do have, and then it will allow you to really expand your team and make use of the resources that you have. So maybe instead of hiring 5 more analysts, maybe you can get away with hiring 2, because you have some Gen AI handling some of the things that the lower level analysts would have handled. The second way is anomaly detection. So this goes a little bit with what we talked about prior, right? So when we're coming through alerts, right? If everybody who's worked, we'll just use a SIM as an example because it's an easy target, right? When we're coming through alerts in a SIM, a lot of times they are rule-based alerts. If this happens, then fire. If this happens, then fire, right? And that has been effective in the past. That's why WAFs were built that way and security technology. But when you look at the cloud and you look at the sheer amount of data and the sheer amount of transactions and network volume that happens these days, things that are rule-based tend to be they tend to be troublesome, right? And they're difficult to manage because you burn a lot of cycles when an alert comes in, reading through the alert, maybe looking through some other logs, figuring out if it's a false positive. And a lot of them are going to be, right? With pure rules-based systems, they can be 80 or 90% false positives. And that is just time that is not well spent. So where machine learning has in the past, with Lacework, and will in the future, I think coming up, is anomaly detection using GenAI is going to be very helpful because you can use the learning that you have to understand what is normal in an environment and then take action based on that. So when you think about each environment is different, right? Not every environment is the same. And so Gen AI can be used to kind of establish a pattern inside of a specific person's environment, inside a specific cloud environment. And then when something deviates from that, then it can surface up in alert. It's not going to be totally dependent on the rules. It's going to be based on what it sees in the history, what it sees in the logs, and then surface up only the things that it sees as an anomaly based on the predictable patterns and based on what it has seen, from what kind of known TTPs out in the wild, right? And so that's where Gen AI can be really helpful. Is it's smart enough to be able to pick up those patterns, and it's quicker than the human brain would be by combing through all of the alerts. And so that's kind of a second way that we can use to help. And that, like I said, for number one and number two kind of go together. If you can use anomaly detection to help bring down the number of false positives, base it on what we believe to be real attacks and real things that should be reviewed. That leads back to being able to do more with less and allowing the people to be happier because what they're reviewing are actual issues. Another one is ask questions and find insights faster. So being able to look at an alert of some type and been able to query against it. One of the best ways to solve for the cybersecurity shortage that I have always found is to bring in people that aren't necessarily cyber people and bring them over and teach them cyber, right? I mentioned my application security person earlier. I had a performance tester back when I used to run that as well. And he had 80% of the knowledge that he needed to do the job. He just didn't have the 20% related to security. He understood applications. He understood how apps were built, and he could break them when it came to performance. I just had to teach him how to break it when it came to security. And so Gen AI is the perfect way to be able to help this, right? So when you have these newer SOC analysts or these newer people in security, being able to use kind of an alert assistant to query on an alert is super helpful. And you can see kind of an example here where you've got a new login using call type. And someone could look at this and be like, I have no idea what this means whatsoever, right? So then you could ask, why does this alert matter? And you could see it would tell you that. And then you could say, how do I fix this alert? Can you write a script so I can fix this alert? Can you write an email to an executive that I could send to explain this alert, right? So there are a lot of different ways that you can look at this and really kind of get more information. It's a great way to avoid some of the back and forth, right? If an analyst is looking at this, they don't understand it, then they go to the cloud team to ask the cloud team, then they got to come back, right? And that always creates some sort of friction because everybody's time is limited, right? Why are you asking this? You should know this. But being able to understand this, it's a great way for people to kind of do more themselves they can educate themselves, and it's a way to get insights into your data faster. So leveraging leveraging that machine learning so that you can get those insights as quick as possible. Number 4, so ensure privacy by design. This is kind of a note of caution, I guess I would say, in that, Gen AI and machine learning, Gen AI is awesome, and LLMs are great. But we do need to keep some things in mind as we kind of go down this route of using them, and as we purchase solutions that use them, right? So we need to make sure that we understand how the data for the Gen AI solution is used and how it's shared, right? So, and there's a couple of different ways to look at this. One is with the cloud provider itself. Obviously, the major cloud providers have their own, I guess, machine learning as a service, if you will, or Gen AI as a service that can be used. Well, they have the problem of making sure that what you have does not cross the boundaries of their customers, right? When you set up kind of this own little container, this own little machine learning instance, making sure that it is just for you, because you don't want data to cross, right? You don't want to mix data, and that's one of the attack methods that is out there. And the same thing goes when you're building your own Gen AI system, right? And that to help you with your security program or to integrate into what you're building. Keep this in mind because a very common attack vector, if you look at the OWASP top 10 for LLMs, one of the big attack vectors is ensuring privacy, right? Making sure you don't have that bleed over from client A into client B. And so we really need to understand how are our LLMs designed, how the Gen AI solutions defined, both where we're using them and consuming them as a service, but also when we're building our own and we're using our own, making sure that we understand what's going in there, right? What is the data source that you're feeding to your Gen AI engine? Because number one, if you feed it bad data, it's super hard to untrain or relearn a learning model, right? And to cleanse it of that data. So you got to make sure that it's clean, but you also have to make sure that you understand what's in it. If you inadvertently load data sets with confidential, proprietary, or sensitive data, those can be queried by people who may not have access. So it is a security concern. So we always have to make sure going into this, going into next year, this is going to become a bigger year, bigger thing to consider when we start using Gen AI solutions even more. And then finally, this is one I think where there's a lot of potential is recognizing patterns. What I have been intrigued by and what I've noticed over the past year or so in the industry is this concept of a data lake, the security data lake. And so that's basically, people want to store all of their security data, all their security findings in one place. Snowflake's got one, AWS has one, I think Azure has one. It's meant because everybody recognizes that having disparate data sources for their security isn't advantageous. And I think, the SIM isn't always the right place to put it. So there's this concept of a security data lake that has really emerged. The inherent problem of a security data lake is it's a lot of data. If you can imagine dumping all of this data from your cloud, from your SIM, from your vulnerabilities, from your AppSec, all of this stuff, it just doesn't, it becomes difficult to make sense of the data, right? Now you're writing rules, you're writing queries to get to this. And so one of the things that I believe in 2024 that we're going to use Gen AI for and that we should be pushing for and looking for solutions to do this is to recognize patterns, right? If you've got all of your data in one place, Gen AI can correlate this data for you. It can recognize patterns, maybe new ways that people are exploiting your system, maybe data exfiltration that wasn't noticed, right? So the human brain can only do so much when it comes to recognizing patterns when you're talking about terabytes and terabytes of data. But when it's when it is a machine learning, when it's an LLM or a Gen AI engine, like they can look at all of this and they can understand this data at scale without a problem, right? And so this is going to be one of the most powerful ways that we're going to use Gen AI next year. I truly believe, because we're starting to do it a little bit now with some of the statistics that we showed at the beginning, and this is only going to grow because we've got this appetite in the security team to find things quicker and to comb through massive amounts of data quicker, and that's really where Gen AI is going to be able to really help, is by being able to recognize the patterns, alert on it, and help teams. And when you look at all of these things and you put them together, from the cybersecurity shortage, the anomaly detection, the recognizing the patterns, right? All of this I think they are going to solve some of the core problems that we see in the cybersecurity industry, right? We have some decent problems, but a lot of them just really involve around the amount of data that we consume, the amount of people that we can have. And if we can use Gen AI to solve these problems next year, which I believe we can with what I'm seeing on the market, that's just going to be a game changer for security. And ultimately, it will allow us to do it'll allow us to do more, right? Security always maps back to the business, or it should. If you're doing something in the security program that doesn't have business value, then we should talk, and I would suggest maybe putting that on hold. But all of this will enable us to do things that put down the things that are mundane, put down the things that don't add value, and figure out ways to add more value to the business. And so thank you for listening. I hope this was valuable. If you want to talk any more about this or anything else related to Lacework or just security in general, my email is tim.chase@lacework.net. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I love to talk to other cybersecurity professionals to hear your thoughts, to hear whether it's on Gen AI, what you're seeing, what you're thinking. I would love to hear from you. So thank you for the time today.